Hello and welcome to the channel. I am Johnny Boy and today I've got another retro video card review for y'all. Hot off the press. Or I guess in this case, hard drive. Whatever. So, today we're going to be taking a look at this bad boy right here. The Nvidia GeForce 7900 GTX. We'll also be able to compare it to the last card that I reviewed. The Radeon X 1900 XT. These cards also happen to be direct competitors at the time, and something tells me this is going to be a pretty close battle. So, let's get to it. The 7900 GTX hit the market on March 9th, 2006 to replace Nvidia's current flagship, the 7800 GTX. The 7900 GTX used the new G71 core on TSMC's 90nm process. It's really just a refinement of the G70 core used in the 7800 GTX, however, so it's not a completely new architecture. Along with this refined core comes a clock boost, putting this card at 650 MHz on the core. The 512 MB of GDDR3 run at 800 MHz on a 256-bit bus. It also keeps the same 8 vertex pipes, 24 pixel pipes, and 16 ROPs from the 7800 GTX. This series was also the last series from Nvidia to support up to DirectX 9. After this, they moved on to DirectX 10. Reviews at the time were pretty positive, praising its performance increase and price drop compared to the 7800 GTX. Its direct competitor, the X 1900 XT, did quickly receive a price drop, however, making its value a point of contention. I also want to point out the cooler design. It's honestly a lot better than the leaf blower they slapped on the X 1900 XT, and it easily keeps this card cool. It kind of reminds me more of some modern looking coolers. We'll be using the same system for benchmarking that has been used in my past reviews. It's got an AMD Phenom II X6 1100T running on a Biostar AM3 motherboard, with 4 2GB sticks of Corsair XMS RAM, a 500GB Western digital hard drive, and a 600-watt EVGA power supply, running Windows XP Service Pack 3. The only notable addition here is the new motherboard. Well, it's the same motherboard, but my original motherboard from 2011 finally died. But luckily, was able to find an exact replacement, so we won't have any skewed results in these tests. Painkiller is up first, and this is where I noticed something very odd. When I compared the 7900 GTX results with my 1900 XT results, the difference is, well, incredible. A little too incredible. Now this game is optimized for Nvidia cards, but something definitely felt off to me. So I got out my 1900 XT and redid the test for this game, and I achieved very different results. It seems that after reinstalling the drivers for the 1900 XT, The performance in Painkiller just drastically improved. And now this actually had me a bit worried about the rest of the benchmark data for my 1900 XT review, but after quickly running back through a bunch of the tests, I can confirm that this is the only game that appears to have bad data. Now, ordinarily, I look at other benchmark data online to see if my data is at least in the same ballpark, but I found it a little difficult finding good data for Painkiller at the time, running on an X1900 XT. Anyway, even with this more accurate data, the 7900 GTX still pulls away with the win in this one. With Half-Life 2, we see the roles reverse. The 7900 GTX loses pretty handily here across the board in this ATI optimized game. While the difference in frame rates between the two cards is similar to Painkiller, we're dealing with much lower frame rates here, so these differences seem more impactful in my opinion. They have a greater effect on how the game feels to play. In Call of Duty 2, we see another loss for the 7900 GTX, but the difference in frame rate here is much smaller. And as we go up in resolution, the gap shrinks to a point where you really wouldn't notice much of a difference when using either card, especially at 1080p. With Quake 4, we once again see an Nvidia card fail to load at a resolution of 1600 by 1200. Very similar to my review with the 1600 GS. Regardless, it pulls out a pretty nice showing in 1024 by 768, nearly keeping the frame rate at a lock 60 the entire time. In 1280 by 1024, the card essentially ties the 1900 XT with only a small lead in the minimum frame rate. In F.E.A.R, we see the 7900 GTX narrowly beaten out by the X1900 XT, with the gap once again closing in at higher resolutions. At 1920 by 1080, the experience when using either card would feel extremely similar, especially with those minimums being so close. With Oblivion, we see the same trend that we've seen in most of these tests so far, with the 1900 XT winning by a slim margin and the performance gap closing in at 1080p. The only thing of note here is the surprisingly low minimum frame rate at 1024 by 768, but really, to be honest, this game doesn't run very well on either card. Supreme Commander shows us once again just how much it can punish some of these older cards. The 7900 GTX does technically lose here, but let's be honest, this game pounds both cards into submission. I wouldn't want to be using either one of these cards to play Supreme Commander. In Crysis, both cards performed nearly identically. The same thing that I said in my X1900 XT review still holds here. Performance isn't great, but in 1280 by 1024, it's still objectively playable and doesn't look like complete poop like 1024 by 768 does. This was a great showing for both Team Green and Team Red. Every game except for Painkiller and Half-Life 2 was a pretty close battle. But overall, the X1900 XT came out on top in more games than not. But the overall performance of both of these cards is very similar, and as a result, the gameplay experience was also very similar. Now, comparing these results to the 6800 GS numbers, I noticed yet another issue. It seems that I miscalculated some of the overall performance numbers for the 6800 GS in my X1900 XT review. I apologize. I guess I had too much to drink that day when I originally calculated them. Anyway, we can see the performance increase that Nvidia made with the 7000 series. It's honestly pretty impressive, and I can't wait to see the performance increase that ATI comes up with in their next generation. But that is for another video. This benchmarking journey was the craziest one yet, with my motherboard deciding to kick the bucket and finding errors from my previous reviews. This one definitely had a lot of highs and lows, but I'm still new to this, learning, and hopefully I don't see issues like that in the future. That about wraps up this video. If you have any questions, remarks, or just insults, doesn't matter, just please leave them in the comments section below. Thank y'all for watching, and be sure to check back soon for another video.